Patricia Allingham Carlson, and this is my video of reading in the tree. Right down the street from where I live, there's a very nice park. It has a stream that loops all around the edges of it. It has some beautiful old trees additionally, and 3 of them in particular are silver maples that must be several hundred years old. They are just enormous. I frequently take walks down to this park, and when I do, it's recently been rather deserted. So last fall, I was sort of surprised when I went down and saw a bicycle leaning against one of the big, beautiful trees. I looked around for who else might be visiting the park so I could smile or say hello, and I didn't see anyone. And then I looked up in the tree, and there was a young lady sitting up there with a book. What a peaceful place to be reading a book. She caught my eye, I caught her eye, we gave a little smile, and I went about my business. But the picture was so charming that I decided I was going to go home and paint a little story about it on this beautiful day reading in a tree. Now let's paint. I began with a sketch because the idea was a little bit complicated and it carried a bicycle, which is not something that I can draw easily. Took me a while, but I figured it out by looking at pictures and copying. And then I masked in some areas with masking fluid so that I could paint around them and make a nice natural colored scene, but preserve my lighter areas with the masking fluid. When I finished masking in, I allowed the masking to dry completely, and then it would be time to paint. Next, when the masking was totally dry, I sprayed some areas with water. I used the paper to block off where I did not want the water to go or the paint to go. And then I began dropping in colors, very bright colors, into the splattered areas. This gives me some control over where the color will spread to. And dabbing it in like this onto the spots of paint that came from the spray mister gives it a sort of a sun-dappled or light-filled technique, and it's almost impressionistic with all the blotchiness of it. It was fall, so the trees had some beautiful coloration, and the sky was just a lovely shade of blue. The sunlight was coming through at an interesting angle, which lit up some areas of the tree with a very yellow gold color. It was important to me to capture this light in the painting and show how the whole scene was just filled with light. After putting in my light colored areas for the tree leaves, I come in with the darker colored leaves, which mainly were showing in that manner because of the silhouette effect of the sunlight against them. The strong darks along with the lights help to provide some nice contrast for the painting and add some visual interest. After completing some areas of the background, I come into the middle ground, which was a field. And I start again with my lightest colors which was all that beautiful sunlight gold colors. And because the bicycle has been masked, I can paint all around it without worrying about the details, because that will come off with the masking. Some strong shadows also were cast onto this field area. So after putting down the dark or the lightest tones, I come in with the medium tones and then the darker tones. These darker tones are from the trees and the shadows cast by the trees. As the colors begin to dry, they lighten up, so I'm adding another layer of color to enhance the shadow effect. By the way, I'd gone down with my camera and gotten some reference shots so I could attempt this painting using some realistic things to look at. The young lady was still not sitting in the tree, but I could imagine what she would look like, and I Googled around to find photos of people sitting in trees to get an idea for the position, but it was also in my memory. And then I begin to paint the girl in the tree. And I'm taking my time doing this because this is an important part of the painting, and if I mess it up, it's going to sort of wreck my whole concept. So I'm going very slowly at this part. When you're doing people in a watercolor painting, it's very important to try to get the person to look relaxed and normal and natural and not stiff. And that is a real challenge for me and maybe for other artists as well. So I blocked her in to start, and then I go back many times and tweak and revise and make it better toward what my idea is of how she should look. Now I'm going back and I'm filling in some more work around the tree. And you can see the trunks and the big branches starting to get defined by what's around them in the negative space. Off in the distance, there's some houses in a neighborhood surrounding the park, and I'm beginning to define the houses and what's around them and their yards. Next, I begin to find the textures, the light spots, and the bark on the actual tree itself. This is a very important part of the painting, being the main subject, with the girl inside or up in the tree being another part of the main subject. So I begin with where the sunlight might be causing some brighter areas on the tree because of how it's lit up. And next I begin coming in with some medium tones And you can see that I'm putting the texture of the bark in and painting in the direction that the bark is growing as I paint this area. I also have to find which branches are coming forward and which ones are going backward and shade the tree accordingly. This is where my photo reference is very helpful. Again, you could see that the bark goes up and down, and that's exactly how I'm painting it with the strokes that I'm doing. Trying to get the textures in. The folds, the way the old tree has grown, which is really a beautiful thing. The canopy on this tree is just enormous. It spreads way out. Now, because the bicycle has been painted with masking fluid, I can paint right over top of it to convey the textures of the bark and the colors and shadows of the tree. And even though masking fluid can be very inconvenient to use, it's really a big help in this kind of case. And the basic structure of the tree is now beginning to show. It will take a lot more work and a lot more layers of color to even get the colors right. But you can see where the sunshine is shining on the tree, and you can see where the shadows are going across the tree. And now the buildup of color begins. Where the tree is darkest, I'm mixing some indigo into the browns to make more of a deeper gray color. I really do enjoy painting trees. They're a lot of fun. And where the tree goes back and into shadow, it's quite dark. Again, this brings out the accenting aspects, the darks and the lights. Cause the painting to become interesting and more lively than if the tones are all in the same family. I'm working into the middle ground and the shadow of the tree again. And as you can see, I'm saving the foreground and the bicycle for last. I'm building up more colors, more darks, and more accents in the tree and in the middle ground shadows. I'm also going into the background and doing a bit more detailing. I do not want to detail too much in the background because it is the background and it should have some blurs and not a whole lot of detail. At the same time, I want to have some shading in the trees to indicate the depth as well as around the buildings. Some suggestion of windows and the architectural structure of the buildings, although not all spelled out because it's further back and more blurry. The addition of that orangey red color gave the background a bit of a pop of color, and it was important to me to have some of that color in the painting because of the strong blues and the blue to orange complement color scheme, as well as the greens and the red to green complementary color scheme. When you add the opposite of a color to the paintings, it seems to enhance it visually. You can see that I'm continuing to go very dabbled with the tree foliage. I don't want it to look heavy and clunky. I want it to be light like leaves. So I'm just using a lot of dabs of color. And at last I'm moving into the foreground. I am dappling water onto the foreground area, and then I begin again with my lightest color, which is a yellow gold. This is where the sunlight is shining through the shadows of the overhead canopy of foliage. And then I begin to block in where the shadows go around each of these blotches of sunlight. I'm using Hooker's green, I'm using burnt sienna, and I'm using some very dark concentrations of Hooker's green and indigo for these dark shadows. And again, this will dry lighter, so I'll have to go back and add some more shadows. I'm trying to make the blotches look irregular too. Some being bigger, some sunlight patches being smaller. And that's just how it looked on the picture. When I'm somewhat satisfied, I'm removing the masking on the bicycle. It's rubbing off nicely for the most part. And I decide I'm going to make the bike red. I don't know what color it was in reality because I've sort of forgotten. But I thought red would shine out nicely in the coloring. I'm going to try to leave some areas of the bike pure white, the pure white of the paper, just to make the bike stand out against the other colors. So where the metal might be gleaming, where some highlights might be coming on and shining from the sunlight, that's where I will leave it light or white. Other areas like the tire and the frame will have to be colored. And just painting in all these little mechanical parts, which is not my forte, was an interesting challenge. And I think I did okay. When you start with a strong drawing, it helps you to figure out how to do the painting better as well. So I worked pretty hard to get the drawing right in the first place for the bicycle. I'm taking my time just like I did with the figure. Because the bicycle has to be right, just like the girl in the tree had to be right too. A tree allows for far more mistakes than a person does. Same with a bicycle. Can't ride a bicycle if it's not painted right. And taking my time part by part, I get the bicycle all painted up. I'm adjusting where the spokes were drawn in with the masking fluid to make them more regular. And I'm also realizing that I can't get them perfectly regular, so I'm keeping the approach on the looser side. I also have to unite the tires with the ground and not just have them stuck on there, so I'm shadowing them into the grass and putting some grass in front of them as well. Detailing carefully in the mechanical aspects of the bike to make it look rideable. And I'm shading in one side of each part of the bike to make it fit the sunlight and how the sunlight is striking it. I'm moving back to the foreground shadows, adding some additional darks and some small details and some blades of grass here and there. But I am keeping it more general and not specific with many small blades of grass. I don't need it to be detailed in the front, as long as it's strong shadowing and shading. I'm splattering some additional colors onto it to keep it loose and free. And adding some to other areas as well in the middle ground. I've decided it's finished and I'm signing it. I hope you enjoyed my video. I really enjoyed painting this and I enjoyed being there that day and seeing this scene, imagining this story. If you enjoyed it, I hope you'll subscribe. And there's links to the products that I use below, so you can check them out as well. You can also check out my links to my Facebook page, my blog, and my products page. I'll see you next video, and I hope that you have a good day.